Today on Look What I Found, we're going over a book called Are We Good Enough for Liberty? The author's name is Lawrence W. Reed, and it is a book put out by the Foundation for Economic Education. You can actually buy it for like $1 on their website. I'll probably put that in the links as well. But also, it's free online if you want to just read the PDF version, or online it's got it if you just go to fee.org. But it's a really good book. And the way that I found this was one of the things that has seemed important to me is the idea of character development. And as a teacher, for the first few years, I would always look at things and say, you know what, that's mom and dad's realm, right? I'm the teacher, I need to teach history. And I'm starting to deal with the reality that I don't live in an ideal world, and there are things that parents think the teacher should do, and there are things that the teacher think the parent should do, and there's a bunch of stuff that falls through the cracks. And I believe that character development very often is falling through the cracks as parents feel it's the teacher's job to do, and teachers feel, I think, rightly so, that it's the parent's job to do. And so, in my goal to find good information so that I can more implement these ideas of building character with my students, I found this article, this book, a compilation of articles, and I wanted to share it with you. I'm not going to be able to go into it very in depth because there's so much. I even tried, and the video was like 20 minutes long, and it was just too long. And so I highly recommend you read this. The first part of it, the first article, is called Liberty and Character, an Indispensable Connection. And here's the first quote. If you value liberty, you must understand that character is an indispensable ingredient, a necessary precondition for a free society. No people who lost their character kept their liberties. That may be the most important lesson from the last 5,000 years of human history. I think that's super important. This is something that our society, in this age of rights that is getting increasingly larger, and liberty is proportionally shrinking, people don't realize that if I want to be free, then I have to have character. I think it goes to, I was going to bring this up later, but there's a quote that he brings up as well, is that if you don't govern yourself, you will be governed. Society will see fit to govern you and choose for you because you were not able to make those choices yourself, right? I punched a guy in the face, so my liberties were restricted, and then I had to go to jail, or I had to pay a fine, or whatever it was. Lack of self-control, lack of internal control turns into society seeing a need to put upon you its ideas. And as a kid, I remember, and I think everybody was like, oh, I can't wait till the day that I don't have to listen to my mom and dad. And if in the meantime you weren't building the skills to make your own decisions, then when you had to make those decisions, it was maybe not the best thing. If you weren't developing that character, I think that contributes to our society's problem. I think that this is at the root of many of our society's problems, is this lack of character is 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 manifesting itself all over the place, and we have our society running and chasing after each little symptom instead of going to the root of it and saying, hey, we need to have self-control, we need to have delayed gratification, we need to be good to each other, not lie to each other. All of these things that are kind of encompassed in this idea of character, we need to have more of that. And I think people want to ignore it because it seems so simple, but it's a very difficult solution to have self-ownership, to own and say that my actions have consequence and meaning. I'm kind of borrowing from some stuff I've read from or listened to from Jordan Peterson, but that my actions matter. And I think that's the more difficult thing. And so they say, no, I'm going to try to ignore this, and I think people understand, and it's a difficult choice, or I think our society as a whole is so far separated from this idea of character. Um, it's something we haven't practiced for a while, that I think that is one of our huge roots of our problems, and it's not going to be addressed anytime soon, I don't believe. If you want freedom, you have to have character. The next quote is bad character leads to bad policy and bad economics, which is bad for liberty. Ultimately, whether we live free and in harmony with the laws of nature or stumble in the dark thrall of dependency and tyranny is less a political or economic issue than it is a character issue. Without character, a free society is not just unlikely, it is impossible. And so, kind of rehashing what I said there already, is without character, we don't get a free society. You get told what to do, right? Going back to I use this as a teacher a lot, going back to as parents, right? If you don't do what you're told, if you're not following the rules, then mom and dad, there's a tendency as a parent, and I'm starting to see it even myself as I've got a little 1-year-old, is that here are the rules. If you can't even live within those rules, then there's a knee-jerk response from the rule makers to restrict that realm of freedom that you've already been given. Is here you had this amount of room for freedom, and you already kind of shot yourself in the foot and said, no, I'm not going to come home at 10. All right, then your curfew is 9. Well, I'm not going to do 9, right? And then constantly wanting to restrict that freedom. I think that our society has a tendency to do that. Ultimately, whether we live in a free and in harmony with the laws of nature, or stumble in the dark thrall of dependency and tyranny, is less a political or economic issue and more of a character issue. And I think a lot of our issues are, again, more of these character issues. If you want, if you want to see more videos like this one, please like this video and subscribe. And here's the last quote. This one's actually pretty long. This is kind of where I wanted to go over the bulk of this. Here it goes. Perhaps we should ask, where does character come from? Or putting the question slightly differently, why is it when we speak of character, we all seem to know what it is we are talking about? Theologians and philosophers can speak to this much better than I can. But I will say this, there is something in the way that we humans are wired, deep down within us. We have a sense of what is right and what is wrong, and what is good and what is bad. And when we ignore our wiring, something within us, that voice we call conscience, cries out to us. In complex situations, the voice can be difficult to discern, and we can even learn how to dull that voice into submission. But we cannot really deny that it is there. It is simply a human experience. We can argue about its origins, but it's there. When a person spurns his conscience and fails to do what he knows is right, he subtracts from his character. When he evades his responsibilities, succumbs to temptation, foists his problems and burdens on others, or fails to exert self-discipline, he subtracts from his character. When he attempts to reform the world without reforming himself first, he subtracts from his character. There's a lot to unpack here, but I want to go over it. Where does character come from? It comes from listening to that still small voice. This is a really good way of putting a spiritual idea into secular words, in my opinion. He's explaining our conscience, right? Can be the Holy Ghost, the light of Christ, the still small voice, whatever it is, saying you did something you shouldn't do, or here's an idea, here's something you should do. Are you actually gonna do it? Right? We've all had those ideas of, oh, I should do that for somebody. And then all of a sudden we come up with a million reasons why somebody else should do it, right? Or our rationalizations. But whatever you want to call it, that voice tells us what we should do. And if you don't listen to it, it will go away. My personal experience, scriptures that I've read, even articles from other people, is if you don't listen to it, it's gonna stop talking, right? That can be literal. Maybe you get desensitized to it. Your conscience tells you should give that man that homeless person, you should give him some money, and you're like, he's probably just gonna buy booze with it, whatever it is, right? Whatever that is, the more that your conscience talks to you, the spirit talks to you, and the less you listen, the less likely it's going to talk to you, or it's just going to keep talking to you, and you're just going to develop a pattern of ignoring it. And then it talks about, he goes into how to subtract from your character. When you spurn your conscience and fail to do what you know is right, right? I should tell the truth, but I'm afraid of the consequences, so I'm not going to, right? I think we fall into a habit there of, no, I'm not even, like, it's such a knee-jerk response to do whatever's easiest or what you think the right answer is in terms of making the easiest consequence for yourself. When you succumb to temptation, when you put your burdens and problems on others, this is a two-in-one kind of paragraph where you can look at it if you spend enough time on it and say, these things subtract from my character, but the flip side of those add to my character. If you spurn your conscience and fail to do what is right, you subtract from your character. The reverse of that is true. If you listen to your conscience and you do what you know is right, then your character builds. If you fight temptation and you hold on to your own burdens and don't just put them on somebody else and let them deal with them, right? As a teacher, instead of me blaming the parents for their lack of parenting, saying, no, the buck stops here. I'm in charge of me. I'll build character. I take responsibility. Maybe it's true that the parents aren't doing what they're supposed to. Maybe it's not. Regardless, making excuses does not build character. Having self-discipline builds character. When he attempts to reform the world, and this is the last point I want to make, when he attempts to reform the world without reforming himself first, he subtracts from his character. Jordan Peterson, he's got, I think, a chapter in his book, 12 Rules for Life, talks about this. In fact, I haven't read it. I've watched a bunch of his stuff, and I own the book. I haven't read it yet, though. Full disclosure. But he talks about cleaning your room. If you want to make the world a better place and you want to take on these huge problems that are going on in our society with poverty and immigration and homelessness and the corrupt political system and all of that stuff, how can you ever expect to take on such huge problems without being able to take care of the problems that lay immediately in front of you? He talks about cleaning your room. If you can clean your room, that is one of the most simple things that you can do, and it's proof and be like, man, look at this, I did this thing, right? I cleaned my room, right? Maybe I paid my bills. Whatever it is, I can function all of these things in my life. I can function as a normal adult human being. Then maybe you can have the audacity to go out and say, I'm going to take on the big stuff. But more often than not, people ignore these small little things and saying, here's what I can do to solve homelessness. Instead of doing that, they're saying, no, we're taking it on from a macro level. Instead of on a micro individual level, they're saying, no, I want to do it this way. And so when he attempts to reform the world without reforming himself first, he subtracts from his character. What can you do to help homelessness or poverty or whatever the thing is, right? What can you do to help the people around you, right? I'm going to solve the world's problems, but also I'm a horrible husband and father and brother and son and friend. Those things don't connect together. Once you're good at being a father and husband and son and brother, right? Once you're getting those things in check, then your mind is clear enough to start looking at the world around you and in a way that maybe you can actually start solving those problems. So I want to know what you think. Do you think that this is oversimplistic, that if you want your liberties that you have to you need to have character, that most of our country's problems kind of boil down to lack of character? If not, why? Feel free, please. I'm asking you to put these in the comment section. If you have thoughts or ideas, please share. And if you have ideas of videos that you'd like me to do in the future, I'd love to hear those as well. But that's me. I'm out.